On a few of the bills being considered, I look forward to addressing our policy concerns and working with the minority on moving these bills forward. In accordance with committee rules, the subcommittee has contacted the Congressional Budget Office seeking informal preliminary cost estimates for each of these bills being considered this afternoon. While many of the bills on our agenda will most likely have a score, we do not have estimates for all of the bills on today's markup. None of the bills today include the offsets that would be necessary to move the bills forward. However, as we discuss what bills will go to the full committee markup and then to the floor, we'll add offsets to ensure that we are in accordance with House rules and that we are protecting the American taxpayer. I look forward to working with Ranking Member Brownlee and the other members of the subcommittee to find offsets for the common sense proposals considered today. Of note, there are still multiple opportunities to improve and make necessary changes to these bills. Ranking Member Brownlee and I will continue working with our colleagues on the committee and any stakeholders that have feedback on these bills as we continue to work through the legislative process to bring the best bills forward. A majority of the bills on today's agenda, including my bills, are focused on ensuring quality mental health and prosthetic care and have bipartisan support. I understand, however, that the minority may have concerns with several of our bills, including Representative Murphy's bill, H.R. 1336, which would establish a pilot program to provide hyperbaric oxygen therapies to veterans suffering from traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress disorder. I commend Representative Murphy for his efforts. We should be doing all we can to help our veterans suffering from the wounds sustained during their service and furnishing promising HBOT therapies that take meaningful steps towards that end. I now recognize Ranking Member Brownlee for any opening remarks she may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for organizing this afternoon's markup in the interest of promptly proceeding with our markup and the oversight hearing to follow. I will forego an opening statement.
Thank you for that gracious concession, Ranking Member Brownlee. Today we have on block H.R. 217, H.R. 1971, H.R. 1107, H.R. 1644, and H.R. 1860. I now ask unanimous consent to consider the following 5 bills on block: H.R. 217, H.R. 1971, H.R. 1107, H.R. 1644, and H.R. 1860. Hearing no objections, so ordered. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 217, to amend Title 38,
The bills were circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. I ask that the reading of the bills be dispensed with and the bills be open to amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. Does any member wish to speak on any of the bills included in the en bloc?
I wish to speak.
The chair recognizes Ranking Member Brownlee.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I'm glad that this en bloc includes 2 bills that are priorities of our Democratic members. This includes Representative Underwood's Copay Fairness for Veterans Act, H.R. 1644, which will eliminate financial barriers that could prevent veterans from accessing basic preventive health care. This legislation will waive copays for certain immunizations, certain services recommended by the United States Preventive Service Task Force, and preventive services for women, including contraceptives approved by the FDA. Under the Affordable Care Act, almost all private health insurance plans are required to provide coverage of preventive services without charging copays. However, while most civilians have been able to access preventive services without copays for nearly 15 years, thanks to the ACA, the same guarantee does not exist for veterans who access care at the VA. Representative Underwood's bill would correct this. I'm also pleased that the en bloc includes H.R. 1860, the Women's Veterans Cancer Care Coordination Bill, a bill I am co-leading with Representative Sylvia Garcia. Through VA's Breast and Gynecology Oncology System of Excellence, VA oncology, surgical, and nursing specialists are already providing world-class care for these types of cancers directly through VA. The System of Excellence also helps connect veterans with care in the community when necessary. However, regardless of where individuals are receiving care, cancer treatment is often very complex, requires patients to regularly see many different providers for various treatments. This can be very difficult for patients to navigate, and our veterans deserve the highest level of support throughout this time. Representative Garcia's bill will help improve the quality of VA's care coordination for breast and gynecologic cancers. The en bloc also includes H.R. 1107, the Protecting Veterans Access to Telemedicine Service Act, sponsored by Representative Womack. While I am supportive of this legislation, which seeks to exempt VA prescribers from a requirement to conduct an in-person medical exam prior to prescribing controlled substances, making permanent a flexibility that has been extended to VA and non-VA prescribers alike since the COVID pandemic. I will note that VA did not provide views on this bill during our March 11th legislative hearing, indicating that it would provide views via letter at a later date. To my knowledge, the committee has not yet received this letter. If this bill is considered at a future full committee markup, we should amend it to address any concerns or technical revisions that VA may request. I hope our majority colleagues will work with us to ensure the committee advances a bill that VA and other stakeholders can support. That said, I'm glad to support the bills included in the en bloc and urge my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Brownlee. Does any other member wish to speak on any of the bills in the en bloc? Seeing none, no amendments were filed to these bills. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Hearing none, I now recognize Ranking Member Brownlee for a motion.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that H.R. 2217, H.R. 1971, H.R. 1107, H.R. 1644, and H.R. 1860 be reported favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward these bills included in the en bloc. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bills are favorably forwarded to the full committee. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now call up H.R. 1969. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 1969, to amend.
The text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for an amendment at any point. I now recognize myself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk shall report the amendment in the nature of the substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of the substitute be dispensed with. I ask that it be considered base text for the purposes of the markup. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for 3 minutes to explain the amendment in the nature of the substitute. Fox grants have made a meaningful and measurable impact in the lives of our veterans. It was designed with a simple but powerful idea in mind, that no matter where a veteran turns to for help, they should be able to access mental health services they need without being turned away. And it's working. Across the country, we've seen veterans who were once struggling in silence now connected to care, thanks to the dedicated partnerships between the VA and local organizations. However, while I believe there's room for improving certain aspects of the Fox Grant program, we cannot ignore that this program is set to expire in the coming months. This is an outcome I won't accept. My amendment in the nature of a substitute reauthorizes the Fox Grant program 2026 through 2026 to ensure that veterans continue to receive the vital services they rely on today, while giving us time and space to deliberately and thoughtfully act on potential reforms for the future administration of the program. I yield back the balance of my time. Do any members wish to be recognized to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute? The chair recognizes Dr. Dexter for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First and foremost, as a committee, we must be focused on ensuring the VA has resources and workforce for a robust direct care system. This proven, trusted system is best suited to care for our veterans, and by many accounts is where veterans want to receive their care. At a base level, I have concerns with the underlying legislation because it runs counter to this goal. I also have significant concerns with the ANS to this bill, which I believe was intended to address concerned stakeholders have with the program, but which does not seem to fix any issues and instead introduces new concerns. Foremost among those concerns for me is the language in the ANS requiring grantees to use the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, or the CSSRS, to provide baseline mental health screenings to program participants. With any congressionally established program, it is essential we collect and evaluate data so we can understand the relative effectiveness of the things we are investing in. I have serious concerns about the concept of Congress, absent input from the scientific and mental health community, mandating a single screening tool to measure the success of the program. While the Columbia Protocol is a well-established clinical tool and provides crucial information to providers about an individual's risk for suicide in a given moment, it is not designed to measure every suicide risk factor, nor is it capable of showing improvement over time for risk factors. This approach provides no flexibility to ensure that the program has the tools to collect the best possible outcome data. Furthermore, I believe congressional intent in establishing this program also included a clear need to gather evidence on the utility of this program. Based on the preliminary data Congress has received from the first two mandated reports on evaluating it, we are failing miserably short on this important aspect of it. I am also concerned by a provision in the ANS that adds healthcare providers as an eligible grantee. Because the ANS does not define what kind of healthcare providers would be newly eligible, I can only conclude that this change would potentially open up access to a new funding stream for community care providers without the significant guardrails that they are usually subject to. It is not a responsible or effective use of taxpayer dollars to extend a program that we have no way to prove in a data-driven scientific way is actually serving our veterans, especially when it comes at the expense of investing in proven services at the VA. As a committee and as members of Congress, we should be investing in programs and interventions provided through the direct VA care system, rather than creating new programs that divert those investments outside of VA. For these reasons, I cannot support this ANS today, and thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dexter. Any other member wish to speak on the bill? Does any member wish to offer an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1969. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Without objection, now a recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. The vote will be postponed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Representative Hamadeh for a motion.
Madam Chairman, I move that the subcommittee favorably forward H.R. 1969 to the full committee.
We're postponing that. My apologies. We'll now go to H.R. 1823, the VA Budget Accountability Act. Representative Bergman, I now call up H.R. 1823. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 1823, to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and the Comptroller General of the United States to report on certain funding shortfalls in the Department of Veterans Affairs.
The text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is now dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I recognize myself to speak in favor of the bill. I applaud Representative Bergman for his leadership of H.R. 1823. The bill would require the Comptroller General of the United States to conduct a forensic audit of the Department of Veterans Affairs budgeting process to determine the cause of the VA's alleged budget shortfall from last year. We owe it to our taxpayers and to our veterans to get a full picture of the VA's accounting errors to ensure accountability and prevent this from ever happening again. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. Does any other member wish to comment on the bill? The chair now recognizes Representative Bergman for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will keep this brief. Congress has the solemn duty to provide the VA with every single dollar it needs to give veterans the health care and benefits they've earned through their service. The only way this can be done is through accurate budgeting and planning by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Budgeting failures at VA, like those we saw last year, are inexcusable and could directly impede our mission on behalf of veterans. My common sense legislation would require the Comptroller General to perform an internal audit of the accounting mismanagement in the VA, which resulted in their sudden shortfall report. This will help ensure that such a budgeting mistake does not happen again while preventing the mismanagement of taxpayer funds, and I repeat, while mismanaging taxpayer funds. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1823, and I yield back.
Does any other member wish to speak on the bill?
I wish to speak, Madam Chair.
The chair now recognizes Ranking Member Brownlee for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I support the intent of this bill and I will vote in favor of advancing it to the full committee, I would respectfully request that the majority work together with our staff to amend this bill when it is marked up at the full committee level. Both GAO and OIG are already working on reports that will identify the causes of the VHA and VBA shortfalls that came to light last summer. In fact, just days from now, OIG is set to publish 2 reports that were already mandated by the Veterans Benefits Continuity and Accountability Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024. GAO has separately initiated a review of VHA's budget shortfall under the Comptroller General's authority, and it significantly overlaps the scope of the VHA review that would be mandated by General Bergman's bill. In addition, I agree with the observation that VA made in its testimony for the legislative hearing where this bill was considered 2 weeks ago. H.R. 1823 requires GAO to submit its completed report to VA and then requires VA to submit GAO's report to the congressional committees. I don't think this makes a lot of sense, as VA would not be adding anything to the report. I agree with VA that it would be more logical for a GAO to directly submit the report directly to Congress when completed. While I understand the eagerness to get to the bottom of what happened with VA's budget estimates and monitoring of budget execution last year, I'm concerned that H.R. 1823, as introduced, would represent little more than a duplication of GAO's and OIG's existing reviews. I hope that the majority staff will work with us to determine what aspects of the VBA and VHA budget shortfalls may still need to be examined and amend this bill accordingly so that we can ensure the most efficient use of GAO's resources. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Brownlee. Does any member wish to offer an amendment to H.R. 1823? Hearing none, I now recognize Representative King-Hines for a motion.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that the subcommittee favorably forward H.R. 1823 to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward H.R. 1823. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 1823 is favorably forwarded to the full committee. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now call up H.R. 1336, the Veterans National Traumatic Brain Injury Act. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 1336.
The text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Dr. Murphy for 3 minutes in support of his bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. They say that doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. And we lose today 17 to 30 veterans every day to suicide. So far, nothing has worked. Last year, when this committee was introduced with psychedelics, I admit I was very skeptical at first. But being objective, reading the literature, and coming to a conclusion that I thought was medically correct, I agreed with this. And we passed this in a bipartisan manner out of this committee. We have witnessed veterans, we've had witnesses, we've had veterans groups come and attest to the salutary and life-saving effect for PTSD and TBI with hyperbaric oxygen. I've worked with Dr. Shah Afradi in Israel, who has the world's largest experience in using the benefits of hyperbaric oxygen for TBI and PTSD. There have been multiple NIH studies, and I've handed them out to each of this committee and to the members of this committee before. Most recently, I believe October was a meta-analysis showing 15 years of experience with close to 40 studies showing the beneficial and life-changing effects of hyperbaric oxygen therapy for TBI. This is when our veterans, sadly enough, given the experience and what's being done at this point in time, hit a wall. There's no reason, in my medical opinion of 30 years of being a surgeon and used this multiple times as a surgeon, that we should not allow our veterans a chance when they literally have no other chances. So today, I'd like to present my bill, along with grateful co-sponsors, bipartisan, Representative Kiggins, Davis, Strickland, Whitman, Van Orden, Maliotakis, Ross, Biggs, McDowell, and Harder to this committee. They are also supported by multiple VSOs, DAV, WWP, American Legion, VVA, Treat Now, Fleet Ready Reserve, military veterans, and AMVETS, to understand how deeply crucial it is that we do something now that is proven. We have had an expert witness, the esteemed Dr. Andrew Komsminski, who came from the University of Iowa, who is a hyperbaric oxygen medicine specialist. This is something that is being done around the country. I know in Durham, North Carolina, we have an excellent institute that through funding, through donations rather, we are treating hundreds and hundreds of veterans each year. I have personally met many of these individuals whom literally had no other hope and has made a difference in their life. I would love that this committee passed this bipartisan. This is good medicine, and I believe it is something that will help our veterans in a time when we have not been helping them up to this point. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I urge my colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, to vote for this bill.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. The chair now recognizes Dr. Morrison for 3 minutes to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My amendment, I do have an amendment at the desk. Madam Chair, my amendment requires the VA to conduct a full literature review on the effectiveness of HBOT as a treatment for PTSD and TBI. At the March 11th legislative hearing, this subcommittee heard directly from VA's testimony that there is currently no scientific basis to support the clinical efficacy of HBOT as a treatment.
Can I ask the gentlelady to pause?
Certainly.
Okay, the clerk hasn't recorded the amendment, so we need to do that. We're currently speaking on the bill, not on amendments, so can you pause? We will come back.
All right, Madam Chair, thank you.
Do you wish to speak on the bill? Yes. Does Ms. Sherfless-McClung? Okay, then the chair now recognizes Representative Van Orden for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We held a roundtable here, which unfortunately most of my Democrat colleagues couldn't seem to make time to make it there. We had people that are using psilocybin, ayahuasca, we had talk therapy, we had faith-based groups. For Pete's sakes, the guy that shot Osama bin Laden is a friend of mine, and he testified there. Another person that testified, his name was Robert Akoniak. He was my roommate in SEAL training. And we both did 26 years, multiple combat tours. He was a breacher instructor. We were both diagnosed with PTSD and TBI, as have really the majority of my SEAL friends. And so I'm on the psychedelic caucus, and I don't completely agree with it at all. I've been very frank with this. General Bergman chairs that, but it saves at least a veteran's life, one, and that's enough. HBOT, it works. Robert Akoniak is literally alive, and his wife, Shar, actually testified for him, and he sat next to her, and she explained how Robert using HBOT, hyperbaric O2 therapy, gave her husband back, and who in the hell are we to say that that's not okay? That is not our place. And if it saves one veteran, it's worth it. One. It's the power of one, ma'am. So when we're sitting on our high horse up here, you guys have not walked the walk that I have. You haven't, or my friends, you just have not. I've had 21 of my friends commit suicide. I'm 55 years old. 21. If I could bring any one of those back for 5 minutes, I would do so. I'd give my soul for that. And for us to sit up here and say that we're not going to do this because it's not evidence-based. Robert Akoniak is a live doctor. He is the evidence. We don't need to do any more studies because every time we do a study, nothing happens. And our friends are killing themselves as we speak. I stand in incredibly strong support of this bill. I encourage my Democrat colleagues to go with me and visit my friends if you want. And I will take you to them and you will talk to their wives. And you can talk to the kids that don't have dads anymore because they killed themselves because treatments like this weren't available. And then you put in your amendment. With that, I yield back.
The chair will remind all members to address the chair, not to other members of the committee. Thank you. The chair now recognizes Dr. Morrison for 3 minutes to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
We're not on amendments. We're speaking
All right.
on the bill. The chair now recognizes Dr. Dexter to speak on behalf of the bill, not any amendments.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to recognize the importance of this issue to my colleagues and certainly our patients. I took care of veterans, many with TBIs and PTSD. I very much appreciate the importance of treating effectively and with care and due diligence. And I also think, as a physician, it's my responsibility to speak up when we are advancing policy that has not been proven to serve patients and will remove funding from other interventions that are data-driven and scientifically proven. And to that end, I will highlight here the research on hyperbaric oxygen treatment is flimsy at best. It's certainly not rigorous. It's certainly not compelling. And I will be entering into the record for our previous legislative hearing several studies that substantiate this point. Notably, one of those studies shows that for mild TBI, this treatment is no better than a sham treatment. We also know that placebo has an overall 30% effectiveness rate. And people will feel better when they are having something done to them. This is shown over and over again. The difference is whether or not we compare the intervention with a placebo, and that has not been proven to have efficacy here. I would also suggest that some of the prior evidence proposed or shown in the record had clear and present conflicts of interest with the folks who published the study having gain from that information. And at the end of the day, this is a question of resource allocation. It is all of our responsibilities to make sure veterans get the best quality, highest efficacy care, and we are not fully funding the Veterans Administration sufficiently to have extra funding to try other things. And so I will not stand by quietly as we propose to waste taxpayer money and enrich special interest groups on a treatment that is not evidence-based when there are so many more pressing things for this patient population that are proven and are effective. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak on the underlying bill, H.R. 1336? The chair now recognizes Dr. Conaway for 3 minutes.
And I'll try to be brief. And I want to say, first off, that I appreciate very much the life experience, and the emotion behind this bill. We physicians face this challenge very often, where someone comes to the office and they have heard from a loved one, or they've read on the internet, or they've gained some information which would suggest a particular treatment will be helpful to them. And indeed, physicians do, in individual cases, have plenary authority to prescribe, in, I would say, limited circumstances, anything which we think might help a patient who has not been able to find all the help they need to deal with their particular problem. But when it comes to, and particularly when it comes to costly therapies, therapies which may be harmful, or even therapies which may not do any good at all, we have to be particularly careful to always stick to our routines, if you will. They are the method that we apply to these very important decisions. Are there randomized controlled trials that support the recommendation of a particular therapy to a person's diagnosis, to a person's problem? And if that data is not there, then we may very well be doing a disservice to the patient by not directing them to therapies that are proven and shown to work. And I think in many ways we would be, and I'm not making any accusations here, that we may indeed be doing things that are against the oath we take to provide the best advice and to conduct our care with due diligence. So while I appreciate the emotion behind this and the fact that you will have in an uncontrolled, non-experimental setting successes, the broad application of a particular therapy might not be warranted, in many cases are not warranted, by the data that's put before us. And I think that's the point my colleagues are making. And so I'll just end there, Madam Chair, and thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes General Bergman for 3 minutes for any comments he may have on the bill. The chair now recognizes Dr. Murphy for
Thank you, General Bergman.
the remaining time.
You know, I'm trying to sit back and realize what's been said. I've handed out 3, here's a meta-analysis, randomized, placebo-controlled trials. There are 40 studies in this thing, 40, that show a salutary benefit. And maybe you weren't listening when I spoke at the beginning. 40 have shown this. We have had experts come across this country that don't just do this for their own benefit. Nobody's, I take a little umbrage at the fact people are publishing this so they can get referrals. That's ridiculous. We're dealing with trying to do things for our veterans. And as for spending more money, we had a secretary of the VA come up here last year and say we're $12 billion short, no, we're $6 billion, that they spent $180 billion more where our VA level was flat. So that's really not an argument. So I would suggest to my colleagues, this is a visceral issue for me because I have seen what it's done, and I guarantee you I'm the only physician in the room that's actually actively used this therapy, that these are true studies. They're apolitical, they're meta-analysis studies that go back and look at all of these things. And I urge you, and I'll be happy to supply further papers to you to show that this is a definitive treatment. It has been put against sham treatment. It has been done everything that it's supposed to do. And yes, we want to continue, if you want to continue what we're doing, then we are resigning ourselves to letting 17 to 30 veterans die a day from suicide. So no, doing the same things as I started out my comments on, saying the same things and doing the same things over and over is a pathway to disaster for our veterans. This is scientific proof. It is not the scientific proof that we saw back during the pandemic when people lied to us. This is scientific truth that I have scrubbed for the last decade. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Bergman. I now recognize myself for 3 minutes to speak in support of H.R. 1336. As we've begun these topics on therapies other than traditional therapy for the treatment of PTSD, mental well-being, and suicide prevention, it brings to mind the abysmal record that the VA has in treating what seems to be a refractory problem. We have heard testimony from family members, from veterans, about their struggles accessing to care, about the side effects from traditional antipsychotic, anti-anxiolytic medications, significant side effects, yet we continue down the same pathway. That's the point of pilot studies, when the evidence may be, to some, equivocal or less robust than they want. The purpose of the pilot study is to show whether or not there is true benefit when you do have randomized studies that may show a benefit. I'd like to thank Representative Murphy, Dr. Murphy, for his continued leadership on the bill, the Veterans National Traumatic Brain Injury Act, for the family members of people who are here in support of trying to end veteran suicide, and for this bill that would require the VA to establish a pilot program granting veterans access to hyperbaric oxygen therapies in their community. None of us want to waste the VA's money, but in the past 4 years under the previous administration, the funding increase to the VA was $126 billion. The number of employees increased to the VA was 80,000, but the number of veterans receiving care, enrolling for care, or applying care, even with the PACT Act, which hasn't changed that number, has been relatively flat. So there has been, in fact, increased funding. PTSD and TBI continue to take a devastating toll on our veterans, of which I am one, meaning veteran, and we should be expanding, not limiting treatment options. It's why I support H.R. 1336, and I urge all my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time. Do any other members wish to be recognized on the underlying bill, H.R. 1336? Seeing none, does any member wish to offer an amendment to H.R. 1336? The chair now recognizes Dr. Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk shall read the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 1336, offered by Dr. Morrison. Page 2, before line 5, insert the following new subsection.
It's consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize Representative Morrison for 3 minutes to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think what unites us on this committee is our desire, our passionate desire to ensure that those that put their lives on the line for our country get the care that they have earned, and they deserve to get the best care. So my amendment simply requires VA to conduct a full literature review on the effectiveness of HBOT as a treatment for PTSD and TBI. At the March 11th legislative hearing, the subcommittee heard directly from VA's testimony that there is currently little or no scientific basis to support the clinical efficacy of HBOT as a treatment for PTSD or TBI. As a physician myself and a strong supporter of evidence-based medicine, I have serious concerns about requiring the VA to proceed with this pilot program without full consideration of available research. Increasing access to PTSD and TBI treatments and encouraging the development of new treatments is a goal I know I share with my Republican colleagues on this committee. However, we have a responsibility to be thorough and carefully evaluate that the critical resources directed to veteran treatments deliver their intended outcomes. The last thing any of us want is delayed development of new treatments or decreased resources to existing proven treatments for the sake of those lacking robust scientific basis. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment and recognize the value of completing our due diligence through this review. Passing this amendment safeguards meaningful progress toward our shared goal of making sure that every veteran has access to the quality PTSD and TBI treatments they deserve. And with that, I yield back, Madam Chair.
Does any other member wish to comment on the Morrison Amendment to H.R. 1336? The chair now recognizes Representative Van Orden for 3 minutes.
I would think that one of the primary responsibilities in how we should conduct ourselves in this committee is by listening to veterans. I would assume we all agree, correct? Chairwoman's a veteran, she supports this bill. General Bergman's the most senior ranking member of the military to ever be elected to Congress. He supports this bill. I'm the longest serving enlisted member of the United States military to ever be elected to Congress in the history of our nation, and I support this bill. Jen Kiggins is a veteran, she supports this bill. Mr. Romney is a veteran, he supports this bill. Listen to veterans. That's us. I yield back. Oh, sorry. I should say that I do not support this amendment at all, and neither did any of these people that have served with a gun in our hand defending the rest of this committee. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Does any other member wish to comment on the Morrison Amendment to H.R. 1336? The chair now recognizes Dr. Murphy for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to urge my colleagues to vote no, and it's not just merely because what's been said, because it effectively kills the bill. And I've said now probably for a third time, a full meta-analysis study, I'll be happy to walk it over to the VA and hand it to the physicians if they want, but it takes about 10 minutes to go back and do a literature search that has shown over the last 10 to 15 years through multiple studies and meta-analysis studies of a salutary benefit of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. To not do this, in my opinion, is to go against my oath. So I would urge against this only because it strikes the whole bill, another further delay, and if they want the study, the group of studies, I'll walk down there with a stack with them. I urge no vote.
Seeing no other members that wish to speak, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Morrison Amendment. Chair now recognizes Dr. Dexter for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out that this amendment does not kill the bill if it is robust in the data. And so if it is data-supported, scientifically driven, that absolutely would not kill the bill. And I think we should all want to make sure we're doing no harm to our patients. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
The gentlewoman yields. Do any other members wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Morrison Amendment to H.R. 1336. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of,
Madam
excuse me,
Chair,
I'm a no.
request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. That vote will be postponed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Does any other member wish to offer an amendment to H.R. 36? The chair now recognizes Representative Sherfullis McCormick.
Madam Chairwoman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize Representative Sherfullis McCormick for 3 minutes to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My amendment will require GAO to issue an update to its 2015 report regarding the efficacy of HBOT at the treatment for PTSD and TBI within 1 year of enactment. GAO's 2015 report, which was mandated by the Joint Explanatory Statement accompanying the Consolidated and Further Continuing Appropriations Act of 2015, reviewed the findings of 32 peer-reviewed articles on research about the use of the hyperbaric oxygen therapy to treat PTSD and TBI. The report found mixed reviews in effectiveness of the treatment and that there was no standard design for the studies they reviewed. We can all agree that a lot can change within 10 years, particularly when it comes to PTSD and TBI treatment research. GAO's work will be very helpful in ensuring transparency and ensuring veterans have access to the latest information about efficacy of this treatment. I hope all my colleagues will share my interest in understanding the results of the latest research of this topic in the last 10 years. And with that, before I yield back, I do want to mention that it's particularly important that we actually are documenting, if this bill does move forward, that we have some kind of safeguards that are present so we can see the results of it. And so I don't believe that this amendment will have a negative impact on this bill, and so I urge my colleagues to vote for this amendment so we can fully understand this treatment. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. Does any other member? The chair now recognizes Dr. Murphy for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for her amendment. I think it's a fair and friendly amendment. We all want to study afterwards to see really how our veterans are treated, so I would urge my colleagues to vote in favor of the amendment.
Any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Okay, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Sherfless-McCormick Amendment to H.R. 1336. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the Sherfless-McCormick is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Does any other member wish to offer an amendment to H.R. 1336?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment to
Chair now
HR.
recognizes Representative Brownlee. You have an amendment at the desk. The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to HR.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with without objection. So ordered. I now recognize Representative Brownlee for 3 minutes to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like many of you, I was horrified by the recent death of a 5-year-old boy in Michigan when a fire broke out in the hyperbaric chamber where he was receiving treatment for ADHD and sleep apnea. As a result, 3 of the medical facility's employees have since been charged with second-degree murder. According to Michigan's Attorney General, who brought the charges, it has come to light that the facility did not perform daily maintenance checks, failed to perform safety checks, or employ a patient work ground strap, did not have a medical doctor or safety supervisor on the premises, and did not ensure the treatment was performed by a licensed technician. I am not here to dispute the many studies that have found hyperbaric oxygen therapy is safe when performed according to safety standards and by licensed individuals. However, this story should be a wake-up call to everyone of the dangers of failures of oversight. My amendment is very simple and requires HBOT providers that participate in VA programs to be accredited by the Joint Commission, the Undersea Hyperbaric Medical Society, or another relevant accrediting body. We cannot take risks when it comes to ensuring our veterans' safety. This is a common sense amendment to ensure veterans only receive care from a qualified, safe, licensed clinical providers and aren't taken advantage of by unscrupulous providers who have no business providing care to anyone, let alone our veterans. I sincerely hope all my colleagues will join me in supporting this amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Brownlee. Does any other member wish to speak on the underlying amendment? The chair now recognizes Dr. Murphy for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will speak for this amendment. Tragedy that occurred, sadly, tragedies occur in medicine when we're trying to heal patients. From what I understand, the child was allowed to have something in the chamber that was not supposed to be there, but I don't know 100% of the facts. The fact that we want safety to occur is the prime directive that we have. We want everything to first do no harm. So I have no issue with this. I think it strengthens the bill. We want what is best for our veterans. The status quo is not good for our veterans, and I have no problem with this and urge my colleagues to vote in favor of the friendly amendment. Yield back.
Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak on the underlying amendment? Hearing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Brownlee Amendment to H.R. 1336. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the Brownlee Amendment is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. No other amendments were filed. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Hearing none, further proceedings on the bill will be postponed. We now move on to H.R. 658. I now recognize the clerk will read the bill number and official titles.
H.R. 658, to amend
The
Title...
text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for an amendment at any point. I now recognize Ranking Member Brownlee for 3 minutes to discuss H.R. 658.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that we are considering my bill to address an inequity in VA promotional opportunities for licensed marriage and family therapists. Licensed marriage and family therapists assist individuals and couples in coping with interpersonal conflicts, major life changes, and a variety of other challenges. Currently, VA hires licensed marriage family therapists who are licensed through a variety of organizations, including through the Commission of Accreditation for Marriage and Family Therapy Education Program and through the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. However, VA's current qualification standards hamstring nearly half of the licensed marriage and family therapists currently practicing, since only those licensed through the Commission on Accreditation for Marriage and Family Therapy Education may be promoted to supervisory positions at VA. VA's current limitation discourages qualified licensed marriage and family therapists from wanting to serve at the VA. Unlike VA, TRICARE, private insurance plans, Medi-Cal, and K-12 schools do not require their licensed marriage and family therapists to graduate from a Commission on Accreditation for Marriage and Family Therapy Education Program to be promoted, resulting in them leaving VA for better opportunities elsewhere. My bill will address this inequity by allowing qualified licensed marriage and family therapists more opportunities to assist our nation's veterans and their families. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill, and with that, I will yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Brownlee, for your statement. Although I have policy concerns with this bill, I support moving this bill out of our subcommittee for further consideration. Do any other members wish to be recognized on H.R. 658? Do any members have an amendment? No amendments were filed. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Hearing none, I now recognize Ranking Member Brownlee for a motion.
That H.R. 658 be reported favorably to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward H.R. 658. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 658 is favorably forwarded to the full committee. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. We will take a brief recess to allow members to get here and allow the clerk to prepare the electronic voting system. The committee will now move to consider the postponed proceedings. I ask unanimous consent that the committee staff be authorized to make technical, clerical, and conforming changes to the bills favorably forwarded today. The committee postponed the vote on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1969. Members will record their vote using the electronic voting system. The chairwoman intends to vote aye. I'll yield to the ranking member to discuss how she will vote.
Well, I can't see if I'm up on the board.
I can't either.
What? You can't either? Can somebody see if I'm a no up there?
I think red is no and green is yes. But I had cataract surgery and still cannot see, but yeah, can we put this on an 84-inch screen? No, I won't. I apologize. It's not on here. I already pushed. I did. I recorded yes. I did.
There you go. You got it.
I was there before. Okay, have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Hearing none, the clerk will now close the vote and announce the total. The clerk will announce the total.
Ms. Chairwoman, the vote is 7 ayes and 5 noes.
There are 7 ayes and 5 noes. H.R. 1969 as amendment is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Representative Van Orden for a motion.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that the subcommittee favorably forward H.R. 1336 to the full committee.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. This is 1969.
Yeah, but he's
Did you say the wrong bill?
yeah.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that the subcommittee favorably forward H.R. 1996 to the full committee.
Given that the electronic voting system is taking some getting used to. 1969.
I stand corrected. 1969.
All those in
The year I
favor
was born.
of H.R. 1969 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. H.R. 1969 as amendment is reported favorably to the House. The committee postponed further proceedings on the Morrison Amendment to H.R. 1336. The question occurs on agreeing to the amendment on H.R. 1336. Members will record their vote using the electronic voting system. The chairman intends to vote no. Does the ranking member wish to discuss her vote? Okay, have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Hearing none, the clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Madam Chairwoman, the vote is 5 ayes and 7 noes.
The noes have it. The amendment to H.R. 1336 is not agreed to. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Representative Van Orden for a motion.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that the subcommittee favorably forward H.R. 1336 to the full committee.
There is a motion to favorably forward H.R. 1336 as... We have another amendment. We did one by voice. It's the third amendment. Did you call for recorded? No. Okay, all right.
Okay, Madam Chairwoman, apparently I move that the subcommittee favorably forward H.R. 1336 as amended to the full committee.
All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 1336 is favorably forwarded to the full committee. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The question occurs on agreeing to favorably forward to the full committee H.R. We did. We only two amendment. We did the amendment.
Wasn't there a roll call vote?
Aye.
We didn't vote.
I ask unanimous consent that the committee staff be authorized to make technical, clerical, and conforming changes to the bill favorably for today.
We did not vote on the bill as amended, which we requested a recorded vote.
We accepted the amendments.
We accepted the amendment.
Accepted 2 of the 3. We voted down the Morrison amendment. Then, because it's not an ANS, you just vote on the bill. So we voted on.
We voted on 2 amendments, voted down 1 amendment,
favorably
and then voted on the bill as amended.
Yeah.
If you want me to, we can redo it.
You don't need to vote on the underlying bill if it's not an ANS. Yeah. Just the motions. So we just would discuss them all.
Okay, I ask that unanimous consent that the committee staff be authorized to make technical, clerical, and conforming changes to the bills favorably forwarded today. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I thank the members for their attendance today, and the subcommittee markup is adjourned. But it wasn't until this morning that I got which amendments were agreed to by local and which was not agreed to. So that has to be in this record.
Are you leaving us?
So. And then have our council clarify whether or not, I think the bill should be submitted as amended.
That's what they put on my sheet to read. Not 1996, it was 1336, so
It's okay. There was 2 of them, 1960. You were doing both.
Proceedings.
But I'll know for next time. The panel come to the table, please. Good afternoon. This oversight hearing for the Subcommittee on Health will now come to order. Before I begin my remarks, I would like to highlight some numbers. First, $20.9 billion. That's the amount the Veterans Health Administration received in 2001 at the onset of the global war on terror. In that same year, an estimated 16 to 17 veterans took their own lives every single day. Second, $121 billion. That's the amount the VHA received in 2024, after nearly 2 decades of war and an entire generation of veterans now relying on the system built to care for them. 17. That's the number of veterans our nation loses to suicide every single day in 2024. That number could be higher, as the VA does not include veterans who lose their lives to overdoses in its official suicide statistics. The numbers tell a clear story. VA's problem is not a lack of resources. VA's problem is not a lack of funding. VA's problem is not a lack of staffing. VA's problem is not that Congress has failed to provide what it needs to care for those who have served. Since the beginning of the global war on terror, VA's budget has increased an incredible 479%. Yet the number of veterans we lose every day has remained approximately the same. And these are just the suicides that we know about or that the VA counts. Some seem to believe that the solution is straightforward. Continue to invest in VA staffing, expand services, grow the system. But the numbers do not lie. If money alone could solve this problem, it would have been solved long ago. No, the VA does not have a resource problem. It has an access and a process problem. It's a blatant failure of the VA to adapt to the needs of the very people it was created to serve. VA's current processes are not designed to provide veterans care when and where they need it. Instead, veterans are left waiting, navigating delays, bureaucratic red tape, and systemic inefficiencies that create barriers rather than breaking them down. While I believe that Congress and the VA has taken some necessary steps to increase access, it's not enough. We continue to hear from veterans who are turned away from the life-saving care that they need. Some are denied residential treatment because they have not previously sought VA care, as if a veteran in crisis should have predicted their need for help years in advance. Others are told they cannot access community care unless a VA facility fails to meet a 20-day threshold, forcing them to wait even when immediate alternative options exist. And some are simply lost in the system, bounced from program to program, expected to navigate a maze of bureaucracy while struggling with the very mental health conditions that make the process overwhelming. In one particular case, a veteran suffering from severe alcohol withdrawal who was seeking admission into a residential rehabilitation treatment program in the community was outright denied because the VA stated they had a bed available 100 miles away. Had the leadership at that community facility not stepped up, the VA would have effectively forced that veteran into homelessness. That's why I support Chairman Bost's Veterans Access Act, which takes long overdue steps towards fixing these issues. The Veterans Access Act recognizes that the goal should be to protect veterans, not VA bureaucracy, and it cuts through VA's arbitrary restrictions by allowing more veterans to seek the care they desperately need in the community when the VA cannot provide it. VA claims that there is no wrong door for veterans seeking care. Yet, we continue to hear about doors locked, doors hidden, and doors that simply do not exist. It's time we stop making excuses and start making changes, real changes that put veterans first. Today, we will hear firsthand from those who can speak to these process failures and those who can help us fix them. The cost of inaction is too high. Thank you all for being here. I look forward to today's discussion. With that, I yield to Ranking Member Brownlee for any opening remarks she may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to first say that we cannot have a hearing discussing veterans' access to mental health care without also acknowledging the very real impacts that the Trump administration's chaotic and haphazard actions are causing both to VA's mental health workforce and to the mental health of many veterans who rely on VA for their health care, their support system, and their livelihoods. Veterans are scared that their VA mental health providers who are being forced to report to work in person at facilities that don't have room for them will decide that providing care in an environment that doesn't ensure veteran privacy isn't worth it and will resign from the VA. They are scared that the very support staff who make it possible for VA providers to focus on care and putting veterans first will be fired, leaving clinicians less able to focus on their care. And they're scared that the outside research and agencies that help improve VA care will be shut down, weakening VA's ability to provide world-class care. Unexpected VA staffing shortages are already affecting veterans in my district. Just last Thursday, I held a roundtable for veterans to share the impacts they're experiencing related to workforce cuts at VA. In a very concerning way, I heard that at a local vet center that serves many of the veterans in my district, there is only one provider left to offer care. Typically, vet centers employ at least 4 or 5 providers. Because of this severe staffing shortage and VA's failure to fill these critical vacancies, the vet center now can only offer group therapy, which is not clinically appropriate for every veteran. Workforce shortages and cuts at VA should not be what determines how and where veterans receive care. If the Trump administration moves forward with its plan to further cut its workforce by up to 83,000 employees, I fear this problem will only get worse and veterans have less choice than ever before. This context leads me to today's hearing topic. The DOGE cuts and the Trump administration's workforce actions are already directly impacting the programs we're discussing today. My staff has heard of at least one researcher who was fired from VA's Center for Substance Addiction Treatment and Education, the center responsible for developing best clinical practices for substance use disorders. The Trump administration has also taken aim at the Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, with cuts of up to 50% of the workforce expected. SAMHSA oversees 988, the National Suicide and Crisis Line, which routes calls directly to the Veterans Crisis Line through 988 Press 1. And although SAMHSA's programs do not directly serve veterans, cutting its workforce will undoubtedly have ripple effects across any provider of substance use disorder treatment. I agree with my colleagues across the aisle that we must ensure that any veteran who is ready to seek assistance can get that treatment. But I don't agree that the answer is to cut existing workforce at VA, cut other essential services and research, and just throw the doors open to community providers. Because VA has not developed a fee schedule for residential rehabilitation treatment programs, community providers who treat veterans can effectively set their own rates, and VA will reimburse them at rates far higher than the industry norms. These providers have a vested financial interest in treating veterans, a population that they admit in their own statements that they have not been able to access because so many already receive care at VA. Worse still, there's a serious lack of oversight over community providers. There's no guarantee that veterans receiving care in the community will get better, more timely access to care, and we don't know if they do because VA doesn't track that. When veterans do access care at residential treatment facilities in the community, we have no way of knowing the level of treatment or support they are getting. We don't know if veterans are receiving care from providers who understand what it means to be a veteran and can establish a rapport with their patients. We don't know if they are being referred back to VA care in a timely manner, as VA is in the best position to coordinate their overall care beyond treatment for their substance use disorder, which is often just one aspect of their overall health care needs. Unfortunately, because VA has not developed a fee schedule for residential rehabilitation treatment, there's also no way to ensure that VA is not overpaying for these services. In fact, we've heard of some community residential treatment centers charging VA up to $6,000 a day for one veteran's care. It simply will not be sustainable for VA to continue paying for these services at these rates. I have said before, we must find a balance between community care and VA direct care. In my opinion, we have not found that balance when it comes to residential rehabilitation treatment facilities, and I look forward to hearing from our VA witnesses on how we can work together to get closer to that balance. I thank our witnesses for being here today, and with that, I will yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Brownlee. I would now like to introduce the panel one witnesses testifying before us today. We have Missy Jarrett, mother of Navy veteran Landon Holcomb, Mr. Michael Urban, Army veteran and licensed clinical social worker, and Dr. Shankar Yamachili, CEO of River Region Psychiatry. Ms. Jarrett, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Lord Meeks and Ranking Member Brownlee and all of the members attending today. I have Landon sitting right beside me, right here. And if you'll notice that infectious smile that I'm about to mention. If soldiers are going to die, it needs to be at the attempt of an enemy, not a lack of effort and unorganized antics by the VA. The VA is killing our soldiers. My son Landon, who served as an air traffic controller Navy veteran, NAS Jacksonville, 7 years ago, was struggling to find mental help in a system that completely failed him. Like many veterans, he reached out to the VA for help and support. His first consultation with a provider was on December 4th, 2023. However, the VA did not provide a follow-up visit until April 10th, 2024. Landon had scheduled events between this time frame. However, unfortunately, the VA canceled multiple visits, denying him the chance to see a provider who specialized in medicine management. Landon tried and tried to keep his head up that the VA would follow through. He was experiencing anxiety, insomnia, restlessness, and mood swings. Landon knew that he needed a mood stabilizer. Mom, I'm struggling. After 4 unsuccessful months, he began to unravel with all of the canceled appointments. He became hopeless in the system. He was very emotional. On April 10th, he visited the Savannah VA mental health team, who determined that he wasn't under distress. How do you determine mental health when symptoms are invisible? Landon said the visit was a checklist, and he explained that he had been asking for a psychiatrist, medicine management. He was hoping for a better outcome and knew that this meant another delay in getting the help he critically needed. Those that smiled the brightest might be fighting a war within. Landon was fighting. He came by to see me after this visit. At this point, family and friends became involved in searching for a psychiatrist, and to no avail. We took it upon ourselves to call psychiatrists in the Savannah, Bluffton, and Hilton Head, South Carolina areas. They did not accept military insurance, take new patients, or charge $300 an hour. More stress. Landon made numerous calls himself.
Hey, Mom, I was calling you back. I was on my scooter. I'm at the gym. I tried to call Howard's. I was also been on and off the phone with the therapy group, Shrink, Savannah, and the people over here at Social Empire. So, been a lot of phone calls this morning. I'm going to get a workout in. Call me back when you want to. All right, love you. Bye.
That call, that voicemail was the Monday before he died. On April 19th, he received a call from the Charleston VA for a Zoom appointment scheduled for May 3rd. He did not make that appointment and passed away on May 2nd. The unthinkable happened. Landon was found in the restroom of a restaurant on Hilton Head Island. He had fentanyl in his system. To numb his pain, he thought he was taking oxys. Landon did not plan to leave us. He was not suicidal. The hopelessness of canceled appointments, feeling abandoned and not taken seriously, and the emotional spiraling ended his life. Landon was buried at the Beaufort National Cemetery in South Carolina with U.S. Naval Honors on May 13th. He leaves behind 2 beautiful teenagers, a loving family, and many loving friends. He was a true patriot who loved his country. Help just didn't come soon enough. Mental health is real. It can't wait. All Landon asked for was a mental health appointment for medicine management. He raised his hand over and over and over again. In memory of my 39-year-old son, who could light up the room with his infectious smile, let his voice, be heard from heaven above, and on behalf of the veterans who struggle every day, let's be reminded to never leave a soldier behind. These are our children. This is why I'm here today. How many more testimonies is it going to take for change? How many? May God bless our military serving all over the world, and may God bless our veterans and all our military families.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jarrett. Mr. Urban, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to present your testimony.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm honored to share my personal story and experiences with the Department of Veterans Affairs medical system. In 2003, after serving 4 years as a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne, I was medically discharged following an accident during a jump. The subsequent 13 surgeries led to a regimen of heavy opioid use, a path all too familiar to many veterans. In 2004, I began receiving care at the Philadelphia VA Medical Center. In my journey, I've experienced firsthand the challenges of accessing care within the VA system. When I sought help in 2004, I faced a wait time of 2 to 3 months for a bed. I've had multiple stays in VA or RTPs where I witnessed practices that now as a clinician I know not to be best practices. In 2014, I had the opportunity to receive treatment outside the VA system, which provided a transformative experience. Since December 2nd, 2014, I have maintained sobriety and achieved numerous personal and professional milestones, all attributed to the quality of care I received. Community providers are required to operate following ASAM, a standard of care which is much higher than that of VA, a standard which I encourage VA to adopt. OIG has applied and referenced this standard during investigations into the deaths of veterans related to the lack of alcohol detoxification standards in 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. How many years, or yet better, how many more veterans must die before VA follows a standard? In 2020, during the pandemic, I developed a program for veterans affected by lockdowns, treating approximately 200 veterans from VISN 4 in under 6 months. This experience highlighted the potential for collaboration between VA and community providers, but also revealed inconsistent practices across different VA facilities. In 2021, I joined a national provider to develop veteran programming at 18 facilities, expanding my presence from local to national. This afforded me a unique glimpse of the entire VA system. Over the past 4 years, I have visited over 75 VAMCs, numerous CBOCs, and vet centers. I had the privilege to address VA service gaps not only at our 18 facilities, but by opening facilities in Alaska, Denver, virtual services for rural veterans, and develop an eating disorder program specifically for veterans. Through my extensive interactions with veterans, veteran advocates, and VA employees across the country, I have consistently encountered growing challenges in accessing community care for mental health. We have observed a decline in veterans' ability to receive this essential care, and this problem is not confined to a specific region. I have witnessed it in VA medical centers from Florida to Alaska. Unfortunately, the situation has deteriorated since last March. At Brockton VA, I worked with a veteran who was denied entry into RRTP due to past behavior. He then requested community care but was denied without reason. At Hines, a veteran was told drive time standards do not apply to his RRTP needs. In Houston, veterans were restricted to facilities only approved by the chief, limiting their choices. In Denver, veterans are all forced to travel out of state for VA care when it is available locally in the community. In Portland, VA, social workers confirmed, we don't use community care, referring veterans to Medicaid-accepting providers instead. In Philadelphia, veterans were denied community care due to the chief who told me, I can't send veterans to the community as it won't allow me to justify my budget next year. The issues faced by veterans in accessing community care are systemic and widespread. These challenges include VAs often fail to provide written explanations for denying community care, the interpretation of access standards, obtaining a consult and referral for substance use and mental health has become complex and time-consuming. Requests for services for veterans hospitalized in the community are not processed promptly, leading to prolonged delays and discharge without necessary care. And 5, ignoring the best medical interest standard. Administrators often prioritize VA interests over decisions made by the veteran and provider. I have personally witnessed the struggles of homeless and addicted veterans in almost every state. Many of them prefer not to seek care at the VA due to the barriers they face, instead opting for Medicaid or community resources. This raises a question: why should veterans who are entitled to VA services rely on Medicaid when VA is specifically funded to support them? VA has a tagline, choose VA. Well, I must tell you, it's not much of a choice when VA employees are the one making the choice. During the pandemic, we demonstrated the community and VA can effectively collaborate to address challenges faced by veterans. By working together, we can better tackle these issues and provide more comprehensive support. It has become an us versus them mentality, and the ones who suffer are my fellow veterans. Instead of creating barriers, VA should focus on removing them, particularly for those seeking mental health treatment. Each year, VA releases statistics on veteran suicide, which remains almost unchanged despite VA's significant investments in initiatives like increased outreach. While outreach is crucial, it is insufficient when a veteran in crisis is met with very limited options, such as being placed on an acute psych ward or the police. Being confined in such a setting can feel punitive rather than supportive for those seeking help. It is time for us to prioritize improving access to care and the appropriate levels of care from the moment a veteran requests it. Rather than subjecting them to a bureaucratic nightmare, or worse, a literal one, by doing so, we can ensure that veterans receive timely and effective support when they need it most. Whether it be at VA or in the community, we need timely access to care, and we only get there by working together.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Dr. Yalamanchali, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to present your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Miller Meeks, Ranking Member Brownlee, and members of the subcommittee.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm honored and privileged to be here and serve our country. I'm here to be a resource to our country and our veterans and the VA. My name is Dr. Yalamanchili, though many know me as Dr. Chili, and I'm a board-certified psychiatrist with over 20 years of experience. I currently serve as the founder and medical director of River Region Psychiatry Associates, soon to be Ally Psychiatry, a multi-state behavioral health enterprise. Our mission is simple: to improve access to high-quality mental health care for those who need it most, close to where they live, while reducing costs and increasing efficiency. Our practice roots started in, and we continue to provide care in rural communities. As our future name suggests, we want to be an ally to everyone that seeks help. After beginning my psychiatric career in the VA hospitals of Montgomery and Tuskegee in 2005, I became increasingly frustrated with inefficiencies that prevented veterans from getting timely care. I later moved to community mental health centers where I worked to improve operations. However, I quickly saw how widespread financial mismanagement, systemic inefficiencies, and fragmented care delivery were contributing to the rising costs and poor outcomes, not only for patients, but for the healthcare system as a whole. Today, I stand before you to offer a proven, scalable solution that has already improved mental health access for thousands of patients, and one that has the potential to save our nation, I believe, at least $1 billion annually in healthcare costs. At RRP and Ally Psychiatry, we have built a care model that delivers patient-centered, technology-driven care across both inpatient and outpatient settings. In 2024 alone, our 68 physicians and 157 advanced practice providers served over 115,000 outpatients and completed over 400,000 patient visits. Our inpatient services are located in hospitals, jails, residential treatment centers, ensuring care is accessible across a variety of environments. With this expansive footprint, our model delivers care at approximately 25% lower per patient costs than the traditional VA or hospital systems. Moreover, we consistently outperform national benchmarks, achieving a 20% increase in emergency department throughput, 25% reduction in inpatient length of stay, and 15% reduction in avoidable readmissions for behavioral health patients. Our providers average 1,000 more patient encounters a year more than full-time employees at the VA, who often see 8 to 10 patients a day on a 4-day work week. With our care model, 100 RRPA providers working in the VA system could enable 100,000 more patient visits annually, while reducing costs up to 20 to 30%, which is what we have seen in our current partnerships. There are real challenges in access to care at the VA. Despite the best intentions of both providers and administrators, the 2023 GAO report found that veterans often wait 30 days or more for routine mental health appointments, even longer in rural areas where sometimes wait times exceed 60 days. Community care network meant to expand access, but it often fails to meet the needs of veterans with chronic mental health conditions, providing only episodic care with limited continuity. Many of these issues are due in part to staffing shortages. For example, the VA OIG report reported that over 61 facilities had severe psychology shortages and 47 facilities had severe psychiatry shortages in 2023. This means that the providers that are there often cannot handle the current caseloads, patients aren't seen in a timely manner, and providers suffer burnout. Delayed care, as we hear, can lead to worsening mental health conditions, high rates of hospitalizations, and increased emergency room use, all of which endanger patients' well-being and raise costs. The VA has a challenge to hire full-time psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants. They're competing with the private market and hospital systems. When needed, contracting with practices like mine would allow the VA to save on hiring, training, long-term benefit costs, infrastructure costs. It will enable the VA to scale staff based on need and have access to specialized expertise very quickly. And they could do all of this while enhancing patient access and care. There are numerous ways that the VA can do this. There are models that I have outlined in my written testimony. I believe that allowing increased public-private partnerships to address chronic care needs is a common sense first step, particularly as this is an area where the current community care network falls short. Under this model, for example, private partners would contract with the VA for services as needed when there are staffing issues, lag in patient wait times, or lack of VA resources. Private partners would be required to integrate with the VA's electronic medical records to ensure seamless information sharing and collaboration with VA teams. This allows for continuity of care, greater provider availability, and reduced wait times, especially for veterans in rural and underserved areas. Private practice such as mine have more flexibility to work with local clinics and provide greater telemedicine options. Therefore, we can eliminate typical access barriers and deliver most appropriate, cost-effective care. In emergencies, we can quickly get the veteran to the best level of care in a very short time. In closing, the VA needs support in closing access gaps and reducing wait times for mental health care. Our model at RP and Allied Psychiatry demonstrates that a partnership with private providers can expand capacity, improve patient outcomes, and reduce costs. This permanent public-private partnership model is a win-win for veterans, taxpayers, and our nation. Our success so far is based on a collaborative model to improve outcomes, and we ask for the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yeleman-Chile. In accordance with Committee Rule 5E, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Carter from Georgia be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Without objection, so ordered. As is my typical practice, I'll reserve my time until all other members have had a chance to ask their questions. I now recognize Ranking Member Brownlee for 5 minutes for any questions she may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Urban, since you mentioned having been employed by a national provider of substance use disorder treatment starting in February 2021, the majority of my questions, I think, are going to be towards you. So first, I believe the company you worked for starting in February of 2021 was Banyan Treatment Recovery, LLC. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Pardon me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. In your written testimony, you mentioned VA having cut reimbursement rates to this provider by 90% for virtual care and by 60% for residential treatment and detox. What rates was Banyan charging VA daily?
Ma'am, I couldn't answer that because I wasn't in billing.
You weren't in the building?
Billing.
The billing.
I don't take part in billing. I just build the programs and operate them.
So you have no idea how the VA's rates compare to other payers' rates?
I do. Their initial rates were, I don't know who set them, but they weren't educated.
They were not what?
They were not educated. The rate fee that I did see was far beyond what anybody should have been reimbursed, but that was VA's schedule. We had nothing to do with that.
Well, VA doesn't have a schedule.
They do, ma'am. I can forward it to you.
There's no established fee schedule for community providers in this kind of treatment.
Ma'am, there is one in Alaska because that's why we asked for a fee waiver that the VA just put out in 2020.
That might be the VA hospital in Alaska that does that, but not VA Central. But anyway, so I guess you don't know if your rates were higher, lower, about the same?
No, ma'am, I said originally when I first saw the rates, they were beyond what anybody should have been paying.
So you're saying you're paying a lot less? Or, excuse me, charging a lot less?
Now they're more in line. No. What VA was reimbursing based on their fee schedule was beyond what any commercial insurance pays. The rates are now in line due to most of the rate cuts, but now they have went so far that rural veterans and veterans in Alaska, you can't sustain operations because they just cut them.
You seem to know a lot about the rates, but you don't know what Banyan was charging?
I'm not in that department. I have
I know, but
seen
you seem to know a lot about, where the rates were, where they are now, but yet don't have any idea what the number is.
I don't, ma'am, because what I'm told is these rates are getting cut, and if we don't figure this out, you won't sustain treating veterans. My job is to build programs and operate them. I get told the budget and whatever it is they set for that facility. I'm not in the internal billing.
Okay. I just, for the record, disagree. The VA does not have a fee schedule for community providers, period. Full stop. But in your bio, it says in your current role as a consultant that you develop business strategies and train teams on outreach to the veteran and military populations. Can you elaborate on exactly what that means?
Yes, ma'am. I train organizations who would like to work with veterans on veteran language, how the VA operates, how it functions, how to collaborate. We've created systems to collaborate effectively with the
And
VA.
develop business strategies? What does that look like?
That means teaching them how they can reach veterans in the community who need resources. So in Alaska, right, the villages where none of the VA employees will go, I trained a company to go to the villages and find veterans and bring them back.
Okay. It just, honestly, it sounds like to me that it says you're helping treatment facilities like the one you used to work for more effectively targeting veterans to receive care at the facilities you worked with, which also brings along a dedicated revenue stream in the form of VA reimbursements. Does a financial incentive to treat veterans exist in the facilities like Banyan?
I mean, it's a job. It would be the same as you worked at the VA. You have an interest in keeping veterans in the VA, so wouldn't you in the private sector?
I'm talking about incentives, about how many people you can bring into the facility, et cetera.
Not where I have worked, no, ma'am.
Okay. I will just say, I think, the providers in this industry seem to have, to me, a profit motive to serve veterans. VA's mission is to honor the promises we have made to our veterans and ethically care for their whole health after they serve our country. Their motivation is to provide world-class care to veterans. It's clear to me that through the actions of your past employers and your own actions as a consultant, that your motives are very different. And with that, I will yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Brownlee. The chair now recognizes Dr. Dexter for 5 minutes for any questions she may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, thank you to our panel for coming. And Ms. Jarrett, I am so sorry for the loss of your son, and thank you for your courage coming to share his story with us. It means a great deal. Having taken care of many patients, unfortunately, like your son as a critical care doctor, what I can say for certain is he's not, unfortunately, alone, and we are failing not just our veterans, but everyone in our community across this country. This is a tragic reality that we are all facing. I also know, having been both a VA and a community provider, that community standard, as Mr. Urban talked about, is actually not superior in many areas to the Veterans Administration care. I know we're failing everyone broadly, but to be clear, what we don't know with these policies, and this is just for the record, we don't have any ability to compare when we refer someone whether or not they will get community care faster than they will get in the VA, or if it's better quality. And on that quality note, Mr. Urban, wanted to first thank you for your service to our country and for sharing your story as well with substance use disorder and your desire, which is clear, to help our veterans deal with that. I trust your intentions are good and that you share in this committee's commitment to ensuring our veterans receive the highest quality of care. But what I read in preparing for today's hearing, similar to what I think my ranking member were trying to get to, is that we are concerned about the reimbursement that does not have a fee schedule, and I know that different areas may have different policies, but that we are paying as much as $6,000 a day for inpatient care for some of this treatment. Mr. Urban, does that seem consistent with community levels of reimbursement in your experience?
Currently, or when they started?
$6,000 a day reimbursement.
It's absolutely insane. I said that in my last statement. No one should be paying that amount of money.
I agree. And so I think what foundationally I would assert is that before we pass any such policy as this, we should have a fee schedule. We need to have control over what we are paying to the community, because there is waste, fraud, and abuse that is potentially going to be a risk with this without better control. We also should know how long it should take for someone to be expecting treatment if they're sent to the community, and whether it's sooner than in the VA. So those things I wanted to establish. I also understand that you weren't the manager, you weren't in charge of running these facilities necessarily. Is that correct, Mr. Urban?
Correct, ma'am.
Okay. There clearly were many issues at both Banyan Treatment and Recovery, as well as, is it correct that you worked at the Livengren Foundation in 2019 through 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And also at Sobriety Solutions from June of 2018 to May of 2020?
Yes, they weren't community providers, though.
So none of those were providing?
Just Living Grin.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The thing I wanted to offer is that there could be community care in different areas of the community, that may be a reflective experience, that these facilities each had improper safety, well, I'll say to Banyan, there were improper safety measures at one of their facilities that led to a permanent paralysis of a patient who fell from the 4th floor roof, that there were nurses who had wages that were revoked, that the New Jersey Commission of Investigation found that Banyan was engaged in patient brokering and the practice of paying for referrals. So I'm not asserting that this is your practice by any means, but what I do want to suggest is that there is incentive for waste, fraud, and abuse when we don't have clear expectations for community care and the quality of that care. And even when providers have the best interests, that you may not have control of that. Is that a fair assertion, Mr. Urban?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So for the committee, what I wanted to establish is that even for someone who clearly cares for our wellness of our veteran, is a veteran, has suffered with substance use disorder, and wants to serve, it's challenging to maintain high levels of care. And our veterans deserve to have the highest quality, most effective care, and we know that that is provided within the Veterans Administration. And until we have a fee schedule that is established and disincentivizes waste, fraud, and abuse, I would assert that we should not be considering further exploration of expansion of this. Thank you.
The gentlewoman yields. The chair now recognizes Representative Carter for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for holding this hearing. I appreciate this very much, and thank you for allowing me to wave on. I also want to thank the witnesses, particularly my constituent, Missy Jarrett. Missy, thank you for being here. Your courage is an inspiration to all of us, and I want you to know how much we appreciate this. I know this is not easy for you, and you've been up here, it's the second time you've been up here in, I think, less than a month, and we appreciate that very much. And I know that, I can only imagine what it's like to lose a son. I can't even go there. But I want you to know that you've made a purpose of making sure that you're advocating for necessary changes and reforms to the VA that would raise awareness about the dangers of illicit fentanyl poisoning. As you know, I'm a pharmacist, and I'm very familiar with fentanyl, and I'm very familiar with the illicit use of it. But I want to tell you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, first class, as you heard, I'm sure, first class Landon Holcomb exemplified what it meant to be and to serve his country. He was born in Savannah, Georgia on April 22nd, 1985, and he was a proud veteran, and he was a patriot of this great nation. He served as an air traffic controller in Jacksonville, Florida. He was a father to 2 children. They're now teenagers, and he passed away on May 2nd, 2024, due to fentanyl poisoning. Poisoning. Not fentanyl addiction, fentanyl poisoning. He was a veteran who was experiencing mental health issues, like many of our veterans do once they get out of the service. And like many of our veterans, he reached out to the VA, but unfortunately, the VA's response was not adequate. And it was unsuccessful at preventing the tragedy from occurring. Under the previous administration, the VA canceled multiple visits and denied Mr. Holcomb the chance to see a health care provider during a time of need. Ms. Jarrett, do you believe, had your son been able to receive care from qualified providers in the community without delay, do you believe it would have changed the outcome?
Yes. He would be with us today. What we experienced with him in the emotions, to the point where I let the committee hear his voicemail, which was Monday, prior to passing away on Thursday. He went to work Tuesday, he went to work Wednesday, called Thursday morning to talk to his brother and myself. and who was vacationing from Colorado in Savannah. We all had plans. So after it was around 5:22 p.m., he walked into a restaurant, as I said, on the island. They found him 45 minutes later. They worked on him 20 minutes. And of course, the telephone call, received a call, and I will never forget it. Grieving, it's always going to be there. And I questioned as to whether I was going to come back up here. Thanks to Congresswoman Miller Meeks, I received an invitation to come back. So giving back, I guess I could call this, is a way for me to give back. Maybe in Landon's memory, veterans out there, like I said, are waiting. And I sit here and I listen. I sat through your previous meeting, and I sit here listening, go back and forth about what should be covered in benefits under the VA. And I'm thinking, why is this even an issue? In the private health sector, under private plans, we cover bariatrics. We cover the therapy you're talking about, and you're still talking about it. Preventive care's been there, 100% down the line. We even covered vitamins in our plan. Preventive care is all about providing those tools and resources to keep people healthy. And that includes veterans and their dependents as well. So I'm like, therapy. And then in 2019, under the Trump administration, he passed the right to try. Yet you're sitting here talking about, are we going to cover this or that? Well, a veteran has the same right as we do to try psychedelics, to try cancer treatments, to try therapy programs. If I'm wrong, let me know, but in my mind I was thinking, right to try's out there. Why is it a question? Why can't they do it if they want to do it? And they make that decision as to whether they want to have it or not based on whatever they know. So under the VA, I can't imagine, I just realized you're talking about there's not a fee schedule. How do you operate without a fee schedule? I mean, networks operate, doctors operate with fee schedules. And when you're in a network, the whole reason you have a network is because doctors are looking for you to steer patients to them, which reduces fees also. So a network, okay, there's networks out there. You have the community care group. And by the way, when I went to our zip code in Savannah, here's your VA website, va.gov, and you can go across and you can review benefits, resources, tools, mental health. I went to the mental health site and I typed in, you can search a provider by zip code or city. So I typed in our zip code in Savannah, Georgia, the facility type, which is required. It comes up, community providers in VA's network. Service type required, so you can type in chiropractic or optometrist. I typed in psychiatrist. It pulled up. We couldn't find that. Please try another service.
Ms. Jarrett, I'm sorry, we've already gone over,
ahead.
and the chair
Yeah.
has been very indulgent. But again, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you for your courage and for your advocacy. You've made it your purpose to bring this to attention to all of us, and we appreciate that very much, and God bless you.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
I
the
yield back, and
invitation.
thank you for your indulgence, all the committee.
The gentleman yields. Thank you very much, Representative Carter. Ms. Jarrett, thank you for your bravery in being here. I guess I just have a very simple question. Did Your son was denied and delayed numerous appointments.
Right.
The initial appointments were months apart when he received one visit. Did anyone at the VA ever explain your family's right to access community care or offer you alternative treatment options when VA programs were unavailable?
To my knowledge, no.
Yeah. And, you know, we've heard today that, you know, veterans should have the highest quality, most effective care. Do you think that your son, through the VA, had the highest quality, most effective care?
Congresswoman, Landon lived in Colorado, so he accessed the VA in Colorado. There was not a problem there. He said, Mom, it's state of the art. He lived in Nashville, North Carolina. He was pleased with the facility there, okay, the VA there. As a matter of fact, he made a comment. He said, Mom, if I were back in Asheville, you know, I would have gotten in sooner. Okay, he moved south to be near family, his daughter, etc. So what I'm saying is what he saw, there are inconsistencies between the centers and there's not coordination of care.
Yeah, precisely, which is why we have
Right.
community care, because of
Right.
the inconsistencies and lack of care. Do you believe that no care is better than care in the community? Mr. Urban, is no care better than care in the community?
Absolutely not.
Dr. Chili, is no care better than care in the community?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, and how cost-effective is it if people die waiting for care at the VA? Dr. Chili, you noted that practices like yours achieve significant cost savings, up to 30%, while expanding patient capacity. It doesn't sound like you're driven by a profit motive to me. Can you provide more detail on how these savings are realized without compromising care quality, particularly within the VA systems regulatory framework?
One of our philosophies is that, you know, we went to school with the community at large, actually, families and universities have given us a unique skill to treat patients. With that, we kind of, in the group anyway, we think that how many people can we reach? How many people can we touch? How many people can we help? So in that model, we set up our schedules in such a way that there's gradients in schedule where new patients require more time, patients in crisis require more time, patients that are midway through treatment may require a little bit less, patients that are stable, they require less. We collaborate between the providers and the therapists to see how things are flowing and either getting better or worse. If patients need to come back sooner, we bring them back in sooner. If we need to see them more frequently, we see them more frequently. So with this kind of a matrix of how we see patients, I think we're able to see more patients in a given day, but at the end of the day, it's the same cost, right? So then when you look at how much is, let's say if we're spending whatever amount of money, but then we're seeing more patients, then your per patient cost comes down.
Thank you. And Mr. Urban, given your story and both your written and your verbal testimony, it seems to me like your experience at the VA or lack of care, inconsistent care, difficulty at accessing care is really what propelled you into the profession you now hold. And based upon your experience, what's the single most consequential policy failure that prevents veterans from receiving timely residential substance use disorder treatment through the VA?
I think the time it gets access to care, if you read VHA Directive 1601, it says, you have 7 days to complete a screening from when someone asks for help. 7 days, good luck. You know how long it took me to get to those 7 days before I finally was offered a bed 2 months away? I mean, I think the access to care and how long it takes to get care and the different schemes, shouldn't say schemes, the different ways VAs have set up the process delays care. And every VA is different in the way they want you to get a mental health referral to treatment, that people just give up. They just say, oh, I don't care, I'll go to Medicaid or I'll use a community resource, as opposed to getting timely access. I'm not opposed to getting care at the VA, but it shouldn't take a month, 2 months, and as far as standards, we can't compare apples to apples when VA makes its own standard, and ASAM is what the industry follows.
Well, let me address that. What clinical standards, such as ASAM criteria, do you believe the VA should be required to adopt nationally to ensure consistent levels of care for substance use disorder treatment? And if, Dr. Chili, you have input, please provide that as well.
I think it should be utilizing ASAM because it dictates the level of care someone should get at. It dictates the intensity of care. It dictates the services, the staffing ratios. It lays everything out and places someone appropriately, as opposed to this, well, we have a bed in the acute psych ward, we'll put you there till an RRT, like, that's the difference.
And if I can allow you to redeem yourself, and I know I'm going over time, so Mr. Urban, is what drives you to do what you do profit?
No, ma'am, I don't want someone waiting 2 to 3 months for a bed.
And Dr. Chili, given what you do and the model you've created, is profit the reason why you do what you do?
No, ma'am.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the subcommittee, I want to thank you all for your testimony and for joining us today. You are now excused. We'll wait for a moment while the second panel comes to the table. I would now like to introduce the panel two witnesses testifying before us today. Dr. Maria D. Laurenti, Acting Assistant Undersecretary for Health for Integrated Veterans Care at the Veterans Health Administration, who is accompanied by Dr. Ilse Weikers, Deputy Director, Office of Mental Health at the Veterans Health Administration. If I mispronounced your name, please feel free to correct me. Dr. Laurenti, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Before I start my oral testimony, I just want to acknowledge and thank the first panel for sharing their very personal stories, particularly one of such devastating loss. It really does take a lot of courage, and I want to thank them for advocating for other veterans. Chairwoman Miller Meeks, Ranking Member Brownlee, and other members of the subcommittee. My name is Maria Laurenti, and I was recently appointed as the Acting Assistant Undersecretary for Health for Integrated Veteran Care. It's been my privilege to work as a VA psychiatrist, being board certified in adult and geriatric psychiatry and addiction medicine for the past 30 years. I take care of veterans with mental health and substance use disorders, and it's an honor to serve veterans who've made such significant sacrifices for our country. Thank you for the opportunity today to discuss the provision of residential substance use disorder, or SUD, treatment through VA's mental health residential rehabilitation treatment programs, or MHRRTP, and community care residential treatment programs. Joining me here today is Dr. Ilse Weikers, Deputy Director, Office of Mental Health, Veterans Health Administration, and also a geriatric psychiatrist and provider. Prior to the Mission Act, in one of my prior roles as the Associate Chief of Staff for Mental Health at a VA medical center, I experienced firsthand the challenges our veterans faced related to access for residential treatment programs. The facility where I worked didn't have its own residential treatment program, so we had to refer veterans to other facilities that did. The demand for this life-saving care often exceeded the supply of available beds, and this delay in care increased the risk of relapse and worse health outcomes. Offering our veterans access to residential treatment through community care addressed this concern. This allowed us to seamlessly transition the veteran into residential care when indicated. Timely access to residential treatment programs enhances overall outcomes, so that the veteran was more likely to engage in mental health services and treatment and maintain sobriety. MHRRTPs provide care within specialized SUD programs, referred to as domiciliary SUD programs, as well as across the full MHRRTP continuum, which includes programs for the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, general mental health concerns, and services for homeless veterans. These programs have evolved over time to better meet the needs of veterans. For example, in 2012, as part of the first Culture of Safety stand-down, VA introduced naloxone as a critical tool to prevent overdose deaths. The passage of the VA Mission Act of 2018 expanded access to community care, furthering transforming veteran care. This law expanded access to eligible veterans who can elect to receive care in the community in certain situations. In October 2020, VA developed the MHRRTP standardized episode of care, which made it easier for VA to order residential treatment in the community. This has led to significant growth in the number of community programs providing residential treatment and the number of veterans receiving this care. To help maintain high-quality care for veterans, VA requires that residential community care providers maintain appropriate credentials, such as by the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities or by the Joint Commission. As of March 2025, there are over 260 MHRRTPs across 125 locations, providing more than 6,600 operational beds. In FY24, approximately 32,000 veterans used MHRRTP care, with 97% diagnosed with SUD and over 92% with co-occurring SUD and mental health diagnoses. And during the first quarter of the current fiscal year, 70% of veterans were admitted to VA domiciliary care within 20 days. Increasing access to community care is a significant component of VA's strategy to ensure that veterans have access to the care they need. And on average, veterans must travel 150 minutes or more to receive this specialized care, whether through VA or through community care. For VA to continue to meet the growing need for MHRRTP care, we acknowledge that changes are needed to VA's current access standards. As a result, VA was proud to support the Veterans Access Act of 2025 before the Full House Committee on Veterans Affairs on February 25th, 2025, while ensuring the offsets or additional appropriations are provided. We're committed to working with Congress and our other stakeholders to reduce barriers and improve access to the care veterans have earned. We want to thank the committee for its continued oversight, and we would be happy to answer any questions you or other members of the subcommittee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Laurenti. As my typical practice, I'll reserve my time until all of the other members have had a chance to ask their questions. I now recognize Ranking Member Brownlee for 5 minutes for any questions she may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Wiekers, can you tell me how many mental health providers have resigned or retired earlier than expected since January 20th, 2025?
I don't have those numbers in front of me for the national set of numbers. No, I don't.
So you know how many, you just
No.
don't have that information with you?
I do not have that number. It's not under the purview of my office.
And whose purview is it?
It would be an information that we would have at a facility and a VISN level. So I would have to dig in to get those numbers for you. I don't have those numbers available to me.
And I presume by your answer that mental health providers who accepted the so-called fork in the road offer, you have the same answer for that as well? You don't know the numbers and it's not under your purview?
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Laurenti, as you probably gathered from my questioning in the first panel, I am very concerned that VA has not developed a fee schedule for residential treatment facilities, and you are currently reimbursing these providers at much higher rates than industry norms. On average, VA has been paying $3,000 per day for this type of care. Some providers are getting paid as much as $6,000 a day, far more than the average cost of care per day in an ICU. I understand that the VA has been working for some time to establish this fee schedule and bring its payment rates more in line with industry norms. I also understand that VA will have to modify its contracts, both with TriWest and Optum, in order to implement a new fee schedule. So can you tell me what the status of this effort is?
Yes,
and when you'll have a fee schedule in place?
Yes, ma'am. I'm very appreciative, actually, that you asked those questions. It's my understanding that in December, this past December, TriWest did establish a policy with respect to reimbursements for RRTPs that are within their network. I believe that that was in part what the first panelist was referencing. Because those payments are now a per diem rather than multiple line items, it did make differences with respect to the providers in that network. In addition to that, with respect to IOPs and PHPs, those fees are now in keeping with CMS standards. With respect to Optum, I would have to take that question back in order to provide you with a more accurate status update.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the schedule that the previous witness was referring to was possibly a schedule that was my understanding is that it might be a percentage of a cost that is charged, or a percentage of what the rate would be, rather than here's the rate for this specific, for an hour of care, or for this specific care. It's not explicit and sort of complete for everything that possibly these residential providers would provide.
My understanding is it's a per diem, as opposed to multiple billings, but I can get you the details, ma'am.
So are residential treatment providers qualified to provide emergency stabilization care for veterans experiencing an acute suicidal crisis under the authority provided by the Compact Act?
It would have to depend upon the residential facility itself. So standalone residential treatment programs, no. If the residential treatment program is part of a healthcare system that includes an emergency department with 24/7 coverage, then it could.
So for standalone providers that don't have hospitals or emergency care, the answer is no, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
So is it true that VA has detected a pattern of certain community providers admitting veterans for residential rehabilitation treatment without VA authorization and then attempting to build VA for this care under the Compact Act?
I personally don't have detailed information of what you're referencing, but I'm more than happy to inquire and get the information back to you.
I will just say that your predecessor told both the House and Senate committee staff that that was occurring.
And that's entirely possible, ma'am. I just don't have firsthand knowledge.
So the Office of Inspector General also issued this fraud alert in December of 2024, requesting the public's help in stopping scams involving substance use disorder treatments. Specifically, the OIG warned, quote, certain drug and alcohol rehabilitation facilities or treatment centers are attempting to exploit veterans with substance use disorders for profit through various unethical and illegal practices. So do you know what the VA is doing to remove bad actors like these from the community care program?
Yes, ma'am. Several different things. The first is when we do identify concerns with respect to those types of practices, we often will reach out to the IG, request an investigation, describe the nature of the concerns that we've identified, and at the same time, we will also notify the TPA if that particular provider is in one of our networks. Based on my understanding of how the contracts work, the TPA then will conduct an investigation. Based on the results of those investigations, then there's typically a back and forth with the VA. When findings are substantiated, then those types of providers could be removed from our network.
It's my understanding that the OIG is still investigating some of these issues, so you might get some results in the near future. I yield back.
And thank you, Ranking Member Brownlee. The chair now recognizes Dr. Dexter for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you again to our panel for being here. I share my Republican colleagues' concerns about the veterans' access to care and the wait times they are facing for mental health care, substance use disorder treatment, and residential rehabilitation treatment programs. As I shared previously, this is not a specific problem to our Veterans Administration facilities. This is a community-wide problem. In fact, in my district, we continue to have far too few care providers and far too long of delays, and that's not improving, it's getting worse. So I think it feels like magical thinking when we offer proposals to codify additional community care access standards when it's abundantly clear that there is not the capacity in the community to accept our veterans and get them the urgent care that they need. So I'll just state that I believe in controlling the controllables. We can't control outside of the VA, but we can control what we are doing within the VA. And as Ranking Member Brownlee pointed out earlier, the VA does not have a set fee schedule, so that needs to be changed. Clearly, paying $6,000 a day is egregious and a waste of taxpayer dollars. But I also think it's not exactly shocking that while referrals to inpatient care, including residential treatment, made up about 13% of the VA's total behavioral health referrals to community care providers in fiscal year 2021 through 2023, those referrals, that 13%, made up nearly 3/4 of the total expenditures for behavioral community care referrals. So we have a problem. I think we can agree on that. And I'll just state for the record that Dr. Lauren is
Yes, ma'am.
yes,
Agreed.
nodding her head. So I'll just ask you, do you also agree that we should be seeking to ensure that veterans are getting proven high-quality care in all instances as much as possible?
Yes, ma'am. There's no question about that. I mean, veterans deserve the very best care. And we're very proud that we are able to demonstrate with studies, research, that VA delivers that care. But unfortunately, not every VA has that care available, and that's where community care can fill a gap.
Exactly, and I absolutely agree that we need to make sure that they have that care. I think accreditation requirements into community care contracts is important. For instance, there's this mind-blowing case in South Florida of a community care provider that employed patient recruiters to give illegal drugs prior to admission to ensure that patients were admitted for detox services, which were the most expensive. Obviously, none of us want our taxpayer dollars used at the doing harm to our veterans. So community care standards, fee schedule, and I also just wanted to ask Dr. Laurent, can you confirm that in late January, President Trump fired the VA's Inspector General, Michael Missel?
That's what I read in the news, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and we've been talking about the Inspector General's office and the importance that they play in investigating some of these things. Would you agree that not having an Inspector General impedes our ability to do that?
So I don't know that I can fully agree with that because we continue to engage with the Inspector General's office. We continue to participate in investigation inquiries, in audits. We receive reports and findings and really engage very, very collaboratively with the Inspector General's office. That work has continued.
I am so happy to hear that it's continuing, and I think it's probably a short-term reality that until there's some upper-level director, in my experience, when there's no captain, things kind of derail over time. So that's not a question. I don't need you. You don't have to make a position on that. But I just want to bring us back to acknowledging that the larger context that we are all here to do is make sure our veterans are getting the best care possible. Our administration has fired veterans staff. It has removed the Inspector General. We are here talking about spending less money in our budgets for the veterans, and we are wasting a lot of that on unnecessary expenditures that we have the ability to control. So I just hope before this committee sends anything to the floor that my colleagues and I can work together to address this head-on and ensure the administration is allowing us to inspect things, but also that we are making sure that our veterans have access to the best possible care and that our policies reflect that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Dexter. The chair now recognizes Dr. Morrison for 5 minutes for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the discussion brought forward in this hearing about the importance of access to treatment for substance use disorders. It's imperative that that the care we offer our veterans comes from providers with a demonstrated ability to deliver high-quality, evidence-based care. My experience as one of the millions of physicians that has trained in a VA facility gave me a firsthand introduction to the uniquely specialized care that the VA is able to offer our veterans. Achieving the goal of quality while preserving the specialized care VA offers requires intentional investment in VHA facilities that provide substance use disorder care and continual reflection on how providers are meeting veteran needs. For over 150 years, VA has been committed to providing residential care for veterans in need of additional structure and support. In 2022, VHA served over 300,000 veterans with substance use disorder diagnoses. Thank you, doctors, both of you, for being here today. In the spirit of understanding the progress VA has made in substance use disorder treatment, I have a couple of pretty straightforward questions for you, and they really are just yes or no questions. The first one is, has utilization of residential substance use disorder treatment programs increased over time?
And just to clarify, in direct care, community care, both?
Both.
Short answer is yes.
Would you agree, doctor?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, has increased capacity in VA's substance use disorder treatment programs led to improvements in your ability to provide the intensive medical treatment veterans, especially underserved groups, increasingly need?
I'd like to ask Dr. Wiekers to answer that question.
Sure, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then last question, would you characterize the educational training and staffing level requirements within VA's substance use disorder treatment programs to be consistent across your program sites?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. VA's commitment to developing a cohesive continuum of care is indispensable to achieving successful outcomes for veterans that find themselves at various stages of treatment for substance use disorders. I urge my colleagues to recognize the importance of supporting the residential substance use disorder treatment infrastructure within VHA, investing in expanded VA program capacity, and standing against tactics that would undercut treating our veterans with the dignity they so rightfully deserve. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes herself for 5 minutes, and I would also urge my colleagues to recognize the care that comes in the community. The reason why a Mission Act exists is because patients weren't getting care. Veterans weren't getting care. They weren't getting access. They were waiting. They were dying. They were committing suicide. They're overdosing. They're dying of fentanyl poisoning. As a matter of fact, in this very hearing room, when we had a hearing on residential care and substance use disorder, prior VA officials admitted that they did not think that residential care or substance use disorder residential care fell under the Mission Act. So it didn't matter if the patient waited 30 days or 100 days or a year, they still weren't going to refer them to community care because they didn't feel it was under, that fell under the Mission Act. This is the VA's own words. Dr. Rente, and I'm an ophthalmologist. And not only have I worked at VA facilities, not only was my uncle, 6 of the 8 kids of my family are veterans. My father is, my husband is, my grandfathers are. My uncle was in a residential facility at the VA for his entire life when his ship went down the Pacific in World War II. And I've done substance use disorder and helped to change policies at the state level. But when a veteran is assessed as needing urgent residential care, how long do you think they should wait? And are you confident that every VA facility applies the same timeline and criteria to get that veteran placed or referred to the community without delay?
Thank you very much for that question. So first let me say that the national policy is very clear and is applicable across the country. The fact that there is variability and a lack of standardization is a problem. There is no question
So
about
if the standard is present, then that means the culture is not permitting the standard to be met. So because the committee continues to hear that policies governing residential treatment and community care referrals are interpreted differently depending on where a veteran seeks care, how is the VA going to ensure that policies are followed uniformly?
Thank you very much. The Secretary has initiated a review.
This would be Secretary Collins?
Yes, ma'am. Has initiated a review of policies, directives, staffing, organization, structure of multiple aspects of the direct care system, as well as multiple aspects of the community care system, in order to be able to begin to answer the questions that you're asking. In general, and these are generalities, when you have policy and it's just not being carried out, there are common reasons for that. Some common reasons is that the policy may not be clearly written. The policy may have broad, subject to interpretation features. It may be that we've simply not adequately trained the frontline staff. And there are a host of other reasons in between those things. Those are the things that we need to address, because those are interfering with our ability to provide the access that the veterans need to have. It's creating barriers, and in some cases, it may be creating additional administrative steps.
And Dr. Laurenti, as I mentioned, we have programs like the Gordon Fox Parker Suicide Prevention Grant Program. We have buddy systems within our veteran service organizations that help veterans to navigate some of these things. And I realize that you're a recent addition, although you've cared and done mental health and substance use for a long time, but how do programs like the Gordon Parker Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program help veterans access mental health care services?
Is that a question you might be able to take, Dr. Wiekers?
Sure. So the Fox Grants program provides grants to community organizations that are helping to engage veterans that don't engage directly with our VA health system. So it really helps to fill that gap in providing access out in the community. There are partners out in the community in helping engage veterans to reduce their risk for suicide. They can also, grantee participants can also access care through VA when they've become a part of one of the programs with a grantee.
So let me just say that, I think that our VA healthcare system, although I don't utilize it as a veteran, nor does my husband, I want to save that for the veterans who have most in need and need that access to care. But nonetheless, I think our, Veterans Administration, our hospitals, our programs do a very good job, but they're not always there. And it is those gaps that we're trying to fill, and these partnerships, whether they be in the private sector, in other avenues, that we're trying to make sure veterans have access to care. I think we all want the same thing, but I think to continually denigrate a provider that's outside the VA, just like to continually denigrate the VA itself, both of those attitudes are inappropriate and wrong, because as we've already said, we want the highest quality, most effective care. And sometimes that's at the VA hospital, and sometimes that's in the community, because if you can't get access to care, it doesn't matter how high the quality is, it doesn't matter how effective the program is. If you can't get access to care, you have no care. And given that I'm in a rural area, our veterans like to have access to care when and where they can get it. So with that, Ranking Member Brownlee, would you like to make any closing remarks? Would you like to make any closing remarks?
I would indeed. Thank you very much. So I'd just like to say that I agree with my colleagues across the aisle that we must ensure that any veteran who is ready to seek assistance can be treated unequivocally. I'm worried that treatment will not be available with the clinicians who have been either fired or can't be recruited. We're already understaffed. We need a fee schedule so that community providers will conform to industry norms. And we need to weed out bad actors and not fire very capable employees within the VA. And for the record, one more time, I will say I support community care, and community care is a critical partner to VA, but we've got to get it right. And I will yield back.
Thank you very much. I'm going to again remind this committee, as we did several weeks ago, that over the 4 years of the previous administration, there was an increase of $126 billion to the VA, an increase of 80,000 employees, 57 of those full-time, 23,000 part-time, and that, as we've heard from Secretary Collins, healthcare workers were exempt. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation in today's hearing and for the great discussions we've had on this important topic. I'd especially like to thank our witnesses and Ms. Jarrett for her very moving testimony today and for having the courage to come forward. I want to thank both of our witnesses from the VA, some of whom may be new to this process, for being here today as well. Today's hearing reinforced what we've heard time and time again. While there may be very good care to excellent care at the VA, veterans don't struggle because the VA lacks funding or resources. They struggle because they continue to fall through the cracks of a bureaucratic system that's bogged down in inefficient processes and inconsistent standards. Veterans in crisis cannot afford to wait. I know this firsthand and personally. And I look forward to working with Secretary Collins and the VA to break down barriers preventing our veterans from accessing the life-saving care that they so desperately need in their moments of crisis, be it at a VA or be it in a community. The complete written statements of today's witnesses will be entered into the hearing record. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I thank the members and the witnesses for their attendance and participation today. This hearing is adjourned.